Hello there, guys, and welcome back to my channel for a very, very special transfer news video. Before introducing our very special guest of the day, I have to introduce Mr. CFCPys. Of course, you guys know him from this channel, but I have to give him extra props today because he is literally the reason why we have this very special video today. So first of all, Pies, thank you for sorting this out. Second of all, how you doing? And you excited for this?
Yeah, very excited. More thanks to Simon for coming on because, he's recorded with me before and, just very happy he's decided to give us his time today. No journalist ever has to give their time, but, very appreciative for Simon to come on and speak to us today. And, I'm looking forward to it.
Exactly. And as Pies has just mentioned, of course, we are joined by Mr. Simon Johnson. I know you can only see his name on screen, but it is the one and only Simon Johnson from, of course, The Athletic, one at this point, really, one of the most reliable sports outlets in the UK, especially, I would say anyway. We just joked off air, the almighty Simon Johnson, as I was saying, how should I refer to you, really? But Simon, first of all, thank you for joining us. I really do appreciate it. And I hope you're well.
Yeah, I'm probably like most of the nation, struggling with this English heat wave. We're not very good in the heat, are we? But no, pleasure to join you guys. And despite the joke, I'm certainly not mighty. I get enough comments to that effect on Twitter. So
there you go.
My followers will quickly pull me down to earth on a daily basis. So if I had any sense of ego.
Hey, in a Chelsea sphere, you are kind of royalty because we're kind of the likes of yourself, Matt Law. Obviously, Fabrizio Romano is kind of like the God Almighty of everyone in this industry. You're like, please give us something.
Yes, we all go to the chapel. We sort of.
There you go. Exactly. There you go. Just to run you guys down, obviously that are listening, we'll just get into a bit of preseason talk. Obviously, that players have left for Ireland for roughly 1 week training camp over there with the game as well on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. We'll talk about that a little bit. Then a couple of questions of how Simon actually does things. And don't worry, we will also get into the important bits of the transfer news questions. Erling Haaland, Tchouameni, and a few other things as well. Do not worry. And if you're new here, by the way, please be sure to subscribe. That'd be massively appreciated. And smash that like button. But let's just get straight into it. Of course, preseason has started a couple of weeks ago at this point. Not everyone of the first team has, of course, joined up with the squad after the Euros and obviously in Thiago Silva's case, the Copa America as well. But just, asking from you, Simon, how did you know how preseason has gone so far? Is everyone kind of like happy? Is it a good mood? Is it a good situation, excited for the season? Or is it kind of like, the pressure of being the defending champions of, the Champions League is that being a bit of a bad thing?
No, I think it's an upbeat camp, albeit with lots of caveats, of course, because you've got this very strange group of players. Lots of first teamers aren't even there, so there's lots of players that are looking to prove a point. Some sort of just trying to figure out, are they getting a chance with the squad this season, or are they going to be sent away on loan? Of course, some players who are just almost in a holding pattern, with their Chelsea careers very much in doubt. Players like Ross Barkley. There's fringe element of the squad that Chelsea are going to have a battle on their hands to shift before the window. But the impression I've got so far, and you would have seen yourselves from the sort of the clips that Chelsea put out of training and stuff, is Tuchel is in a very positive, upbeat mood. But you can imagine behind the scenes, there will be a little bit of anxiety that there's no one, particularly certain someone, hasn't come through the door yet.
No, that makes sense. In terms of, it is an upbeat camp, which is obviously good to hear, good to know. But because you just mentioned a lot of these players that might go out on loan, might stay, has there anybody that has kind of somewhat surprisingly impressed Tuchel potentially and maybe potentially changed his mind on whether he's staying or not? I don't know, maybe Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Malang Sarr, Conor Gallagher, one of these guys. Is there anything that you know about?
I think it's a little bit too early to say, and certainly there's going to be a lot of decisions that are going to be left later in the window because inevitably outgoings to a degree will depend on incomings. There is a chance for some of these guys to be part of the squad because Chelsea don't get their targets, but they'd be very much sort of filling out the roster rather than being in the first team. The impression I have, for example, Conor Gallagher, I think in his heart of hearts he would love to stay, but we're getting a lot of noises that a loan is probably more likely with Crystal Palace very much in the forefront. Of course, his close friend Mark Gurhey's just completed a permanent transfer there. There's a delicate balance, isn't there, between, for the young players, what is better for them, being around this great squad that's competing for honours, but your game time's a bit limited, or taking a punt on a season-long loan. It's always a delicate balance, because, of course, if you get on that loan train, there may be no guarantees that you'll ever get back, get involved. But then, you look at some of the players that of course have been part of the first team for the last couple of seasons: Mason Mount, Reece James, Tammy Abraham, etc. They went away on loan, made their claim, and got involved. So it's a delicate balance, and Chelsea, like I said, I think it's a very complicated end to the window for them. We're 6 weeks away. They've got an awful lot of business to sort out, and it's not going to be easy, because we're in a post-pandemic transfer world where a lot of clubs don't have that much money to play with, so it's going to make getting players out a bit tricky.
100%, and also I feel like a loan to Crystal Palace right now might also be a bit risky. Obviously, they've just changed managers after a long time of Roy Hodgson now to Patrick Vieira. Who knows how that's going to go? So I don't really know. One quick question, because I saw you tweet about this earlier, that our friendly in Ireland will be behind closed doors. Do you know, does that also mean it will not be televised or streamed anywhere?
I don't know that for sure. But given the first one against Peterborough United was not televised, I would imagine that it'll be the same. Like it won't be broadcast. But I don't quote me on that. Don't hold me to account for that. I just think it's unlikely, because I just get the feeling Chelsea want to keep it very low key, and they keep flagging the Bournemouth game as kind of like, this is your chance to see Chelsea, and Tuchel perhaps wants to keep a few things under wraps this early stage of pre-season.
That makes sense. And obviously we've got the two friendlies against Tottenham and Arsenal as well. And then just the last question in terms of pre-season, obviously something that's been on a lot of Chelsea fans' minds since the day Thomas Tuchel joined, really. What we all knew when we all did our own research, what you guys at the Athletic wrote, or whether it was anybody else, Tuchel has always been known to be tactically extremely intricate, change formations. There was this one game back at Mainz when he changed formation like 6 times in the space of one game and stuff. Is there but then on the contrary, kind of stuck to the same formation, except maybe switching between a 2 behind the striker or 1 behind 2 strikers, always stuck to the 3-4-2-1, if that makes sense. Is there an idea in there that he might think to properly change the main formation for next season, or is it going to be a case of, sure, we're going to work on a back 4 to have it available when we need it, but the main thing is most likely still going to be the 3 at the back? Of course, interest in Hakimi certainly suggests so, because by far his strongest position is, of course, the wing-back role. But I'm just wondering if the 4 at the back could be a potential, serious change, or is that also dependent on incomings? I'm wondering.
I've only had sort of one sort of brief indication so far, a bit of a clue that there is a possibility Chelsea won't be playing with wing-backs, funny enough, this season, or certainly that's a possibility in his mind. Someone told me that the other day, it'd be a surprise though, because certainly in the early start of the season, again, it's such a difficult thing to call, because he has a full pre-season, but he doesn't have a full pre-season with his first team squad. This staggered return, so it's going to be a huge. Like, I'm sure from if he'd had everyone back from day one, that it'd be a lot easier for him to start with a new formation if that's what he's thinking. I hasten to add, he's been working on different formations from day one. Like it's not like back since January he's only played with 3 at the back in training. He has tried things in in training. He's also shown he can make changes during a game on more than one occasion. But if I was a betting man, I still think he's going to go with 3 at the back.
That makes sense. But I think on that note, I suppose we should probably get to some of the questions that our viewers have sent in. And Pice, why don't you start us off, because there have been quite a few, and obviously we need to get through at least a few, because otherwise, everyone will go absolutely mental at us on Twitter.
Yeah, so into more of the transfer stuff, Simon, we've got some questions. The first one really is, what are the club actually doing at the moment? Because I know, you've wrote a few articles about, the fans are getting really impatient, and I'm one of them. I'm one of the most impatient fans. I want to see signings, especially because of last summer. Obviously, we spent so much, we did so many transfers so quickly, right? We ended up bringing 5 or 6 players. So, what are the club actually doing at the moment? And do you actually think Chelsea are confident about landing Haaland? Because obviously it's been a few weeks now, and we still haven't pulled out at all. It's there's rumours of ongoing negotiations. Some people are saying we aren't actually talking to them. What are the club actually doing? Because Fabrizio said we're pretty relaxed, but is that the case, or do you think we are constantly working on targets?
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, I'm fully aware of the frustration, mainly because I get, and this is kind of why I referred to it in the piece that I had to do the other day, because my desk asked me to write another transfer piece, and I was like, well, I only wrote one 6 weeks ago, and basically nothing's changed. There's very little has changed, and I was very wary of people going, you're not really saying anything. This is the problem, is that with Chelsea going for the best of the best, it was never going to be a straightforward. It wasn't going to be like last year. I mean, yes, there are similarities with Werner and Havertz in that the rivals for their signature were not in a financial situation to buy them that year, last year. So that's why Chelsea went all out to get them, and it's history repeating itself. In that Chelsea think, right, if the best chance they have of getting Haaland is this year, because the big clubs, particularly the Spanish ones, Real Madrid especially, are gambling on Haaland staying put for another year, and then they'll trigger the release clause. And you've got to bear in mind that the commission that the agent Mino Raiola and his dad can earn will be significantly higher next year than this year. So that's part of it. But what are they doing? They are trying their utmost to persuade Haaland to come. But Borussia Dortmund are very much a one big player out a year. And even though they stand to make a significant loss compared to what they can earn from Chelsea now to what they can earn next year when the release clause kicks in, they're thinking, if we sell Haaland now, it could really affect our chances of success, qualifying for the Champions League, etc., and then they lose money that way. So, look, Chelsea are doing their utmost to try and persuade things. Unfortunately, I'm hearing more and more noises that Dortmund aren't for budging. I find it very hard to underestimate Roman Abramovich, because he's got a ridiculous amount of money. As we all know, he wants this deal. Tuchel wants this deal. Everything I'm told is that Chelsea haven't given up. They want to make this happen. But everything I'm hearing from Germany is that it won't happen. So that's why we're in this awful holding pattern. We're like a plane on the runway waiting to take off, but there's lots of planes parked in front of us. We're stuck, in terms of Chelsea as a club. So they have been looking at alternatives. And Lukaku, for example, is one of them. And that hasn't gone away. The situation in Inter Milan, whilst they have been able to make money from Hakimi sale to PSG, that's by no means certain that that deal is dead. So, I feel like I'm not really saying anything new, but that's because there is nothing new to say, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I do have a kind of a short follow-up question on that, but just quickly, because I saw you talk about it yesterday in an article, and I am actually Austrian, of Austrian nationality, and you've
Oh yeah,
mentioned Sasa Kalajdzic, obviously, who plays for Stuttgart and obviously has recently, over the last few months, really made his first few appearances for the Austrian national team. And as much as I like him because he plays for my national team, scored against Italy and blah, 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 I'm like, in my opinion, not the guy Chelsea need. I'm like, I don't need an Austrian Peter Crouch right now. Like, I want Haaland, not like,
yeah, yeah.
is that a serious thing? Or because that I was like, where's that come from?
Yeah, no, it's a name. Obviously, we're not talking Haaland type. Oh, if they can't get Haaland, they're signing this guy. It is. I kind of refer back to a piece I wrote last week again about Haaland, the obsession. But it was like, what do Chelsea do? You know, they're in this awkward position of, well, are they going to give up entirely if they don't get him this year? They'll still take a punt perhaps next year, although I think their chances would diminish. So do you sign a stopgap? They've already let Giroud go, and I think this is where Kalajdzic comes in, because he's not going to be like your first team starting every week. But are you, as a club, are you prepared to spend 34 million plus on just sort of a backup guy with a lot of potential, but he's very raw. And
he's not even that young anymore. Like, he's young, he's 24, but it's not like he's 20.
No, it's but as sort of described to me, he's still a project.
Yeah,
he's still a project. You know, he's still rough around the edge. Obviously, got some talent there. I mean, it would be a good sort of plan B option, but is it going to get the pulses racing? I don't think so.
no,
Obviously
no,
not.
maybe
Particularly when the sort of the hopes and sights are set on Haaland, and then you end up with, well, put it this way, whoever comes in instead is going to be a little bit, even Lukaku to a degree. I get the impression that there's a bit of a split among the fan base about the prospect of Lukaku coming.
Yeah,
I personally
probably
think
his age alongside the transfer fee. Then I suppose in terms of Lukaku.
Yeah, I mean, at 28, he's obviously, but I mean, you could still get sort of 4 or 5. I mean, look how long Drogba and there's the. I hate to compare the two. Obviously, I'm not saying that, but look how long Drogba was able to play at the highest level for, and of course, Lukaku's always that's his idol. So he would probably think he can go on as long as Didier did if he comes back to Chelsea. The caveat to Lukaku is he feels, whilst there was a line that I referred to which got picked up on notice on Twitter about he's always felt this unfinished business at Chelsea, and that's true, but it's not quite at the moment. It's not quite as that feeling is not quite as strong as it was a few years ago when he came so close to coming back. Simply because he's so happy in Italy, so happy at Inter Milan. He feels like he's got a lot more respect in Italy. That in the Premier League, there seems to be this negative attitude towards him about what he can't do, you know, whether he scores enough goals in the big games, etc., etc. So I think there's an element of, well, hang on a minute, do I really want to go back to a country where I'm going to be back under the microscope for everything I do, whereas in Italy, they seem to love me. You know, even sort of outside of Inter Milan, there's a lot more respect for him there. But at the same time, it's Chelsea. If there was one club he'd leave Inter Milan for, I get the impression it would be Chelsea.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just like I mentioned, that follow-up, because potentially some of the viewers don't really know how things in the background quite work. You know how you said we're kind of trying to convince Dortmund and Haaland of making this happen right now, but without us placing any official bids, how can people kind of imagine that kind of going? Is it kind of Marina Granovskaya being in conversation with some Dortmund officials? Is it being in conversation with Erling Haaland's, agent, obviously Mino Raiola, or his dad? Or how does this actually happen? Because you mentioned there, Dortmund is a club where they only usually let one big guy go, and they already let Sancho go. But by that logic, I mean, if it's all about like money and they just want, say, 175 million euros, well, then we could have put those 175 million euros on the table a few weeks ago before Sancho left. If that is the problem, really. So I'm wondering, both for myself to some extent, but mostly for the viewers, how does this behind the scenes process actually work?
Yeah, I mean, first the point about Sancho. I mean, just to deal with that one first. He was always the one that Dortmund were prepared to sell. I have to make that point. They don't want to sell Haaland this window, despite the money that's being talked about. It's good in terms of how it works. Yes, there are conversations between representatives. I mean, Chelsea have been talking with Raiola for quite a while, just generally, really, because their relationship hit a really sour point over the Lukaku failed transfer when he ended up at Man United. Chelsea felt very, very upset about that one, and things were pretty frosty. So, but yes, the impression is that I've certainly given is in the last year or two they've been talking a lot to Raiola to butter him up, as it were, with Haaland in mind. So yeah, there'll be lots of conversations with Raiola. Yes, there'll be little chats with Dortmund, I'm sure, but it's not going to be a daily. I don't think there's going to be a daily exercise here. It's not like that they're on the phone all the time. And I wish, for example, I'm not a fly on the wall. I can't. I'm not there every step of the way. So one only sort of gets a trickle effect of what's happening behind the scenes in terms of how it works in the discussions. You tend to, with these kind of things, you tend to find out more after the fact as well. Yeah, certainly in terms of the intricacies of how a deal is done. I mean, some of the reads we've done on like the big signings, like from last year, yes, we had indications of stuff, but we found out far more about how the actual deal was negotiated, what Chelsea went through, the kind of meetings that Cech and Lampard, for example, were flying out to talk to these guys. We got far more detail of that after the event than actually before it. I mean, I'd love to have been on the plane with them, so I could have had it warts and all. But yeah, it's at the moment that it's kind of one of those where, look, Chelsea could be on the phone to them now. It's that kind of fluid situation.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so. I suppose on that note, though, Pys, because obviously we do need to get through a couple of more questions. Obviously, if you have anything to follow up on, obviously, the whole Haaland situation, please do. But otherwise, why don't we get to the next question, because we do have a couple more.
Yeah, so I'm moving position slightly now towards the defence. There's been a lot of rumours about Chelsea potentially buying a centre-back. For me personally, I think it's one of the last things we need to target, but probably striker and DM is probably first, but there still have been rumours of centre-backs. So obviously, you've wrote before about a couple of targets, but there's been a couple more rumoured that I've heard and that Chelsea fans have heard. There's rumours of Tuchel liking Wolfsburg centre-back Maxence Lacroix, I think it is, and also Jules Kounde has been mentioned quite a bit. Are any of these true, Simon? And would we have to sanction Zuma to bring one in? Because that is like the whole rumour. We sold Gerhi, but ideally, surely sell Zuma and then bring one in. Like, is that the case or not?
Yeah, so Kounde is, I mean, I've ended up sort of brushing over because there's quite a list of centre-backs. So like in my most recent piece, I kind of ended up probably being a bit lazy because I just felt like I was repeating myself. But it's kind of go among others that they've looked at, blah, blah, blah. There's Nicolas Sula, and they did make an inquiry for Ben White, but of course he's off to Arsenal. But yes, Kounde is one that I mentioned earlier in the year. Lacroix is a new one for me, but I wouldn't be surprised because of the Bundesliga. Tuchel obviously knows that league very well. Zuma is one that has been definitely earmarked for sale. That was the case. That's been the case for a year or two now, actually, because for a few reasons. One, because of the kind of money they can get for him, but two, in terms of the way he plays. He's not very good on the ball. Very good defender. Well, he has his moments. There have been games where I have my doubts about him defensively, but he is good in the air, and he's certainly shown that, like with his set piece goals last season. but again, referring to what I sort of said earlier in the pod, that selling players is difficult. The kind of money I keep hearing Marina, as per usual, is asking for top dollar for every single player. Even the youngsters that are about to leave. Negotiations have been quite difficult for the buying club to try and agree a fee. And just getting back onto why Chelsea looking at centre back. Another reason is the amount of players with 1 year left on their deal. Chelsea have got to think about the long term. Silva, of course, you would imagine that this year would be his last year at Chelsea. Rudiger, there's no guarantees he'll sign an extension. He's asking for a lot of money, wages-wise. Christensen, of course, has got just 1 year left. Chelsea have started talks with him, but there's always a worry that, in January, he could wait and then start negotiating with foreign clubs. And Azpilicueta has only got a year left. And will need replacing at some point, even though as a captain, he's got a very key role there. So this is why the centre-back is of primary concern for not just for Tuchel, but for Chelsea, sort of looking forward.
Yeah, that does make sense. Like all those explanations do make sense. But then what in kind of to opposite that, what does make sense to me is then letting Mark Guehi go. I mean, obviously there might have been a situation where he didn't want to sign a new contract either. And then therefore kind of, okay, we can make money for him. We're struggling a bit more to get rid of Zuma, for example. But if you're kind of a bit worried about what happens to Zuma, what happens to Rudiger, what happens to potentially even Christensen, and Aspi and Thiago Silva do need to be replaced at some point, why do you let go your probably most highly touted young centre-back that you brought through the academy after you had a fantastic loan spell in the Championship? Okay, it wasn't a Championship, so jumping straight to the champions of Europe is a big step. But still, if that's kind of the worry going on at Chelsea, that still baffles me a little bit. I can't lie.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget, I think he's had a major say in this and what he wants to do. And Chelsea, unlike a lot of the players they've let go, they're having included like a first option to sort of buy him back sort of thing. So it's not like it's done and dusted. But I think he looked at the situation and thought, well, the best I'm going to get is sort of being, the squad man, the guy on the bench that gets perhaps a run out in a League Cup tie against low league opposition, that kind of thing. And he's at a stage of career where he wants to play regularly, and he wasn't prepared to just go out on another loan because, of course, Chelsea would want him to sign a new contract as part of that. And I think he just went, no, I want to have a permanent home, know where I'm playing. I'm sure seeing Fikayo Tomori getting his move to AC Milan and sort of saying, right, this is the way to go. It's the same as what's going on with the younger kids that have written about that. There is a concern about how much chance these kids are going to get in their minds because Frank Lampard and Jody Morris aren't there anymore. I think that their departure, whilst I think is clearly been proved to be the right decision, no one can argue with that.
Yeah.
But there's a price to pay, and the price is that the academy and Chelsea's best youngsters are going to be thinking, well, is Chelsea going back to the previous sort of way of doing things of, let's be honest, sort of mainly going out on loan and then selling, rather than giving a genuine chance to these guys? I know Tuchel has said that he wants to give a chance to the youngsters, but he's already shown with his treatment of Tammy Abraham and to a degree Hudson-Odoi, Billy Gilmore, etc., that he will pick the experienced guys, the expensive signings over the academy talent.
As a really quick last follow-up question on that point, because do you think that will continue to be that way next season, or was the picking the experience also a case of, okay, I joined mid-season, we really had to get top four, then somehow we also ended up in a Champions League semi-final and final, and when on earth would I have played young players, if that makes sense? Like, do you think that will continue, that experienced players will, get the advantage, I suppose, of Tuchel, or will that slightly change if now that he has kind of a full season, and even if not with the whole first team squad preseason, still a preseason to get everything better prepared, I suppose.
Well, the caveat is Tuchel has shown if you're good enough, if you really prove yourself, and I'm talking about Mason Mount and Reece James here, he will trust you. So there is the sort of suggestion therefore that what he's seen from the other guys, that they've not shown enough. I mean, Billy Gilmour, I think, I understand why he's gone on loan. I think he's ready to play for Chelsea now. But he's got Jorginho, Kovacic, and Kounde ahead of him. And it's quite a big call to leave one of those out for a 20-year-old. But yeah, will it continue? I think it probably genuinely will, simply because certainly I can't see many of the new. There won't be any new names from the academy. I can't see sort of challenging. I mean, Bro just signed a new deal. He's got the best chance, but I think he's very much, if he stays and doesn't go on loan elsewhere, he'd be very much a sort of backup. He's still going to be trusting Havertz and Werner ahead of him on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And just to get a last question in there, because it is a name that has been touted a few times. Pice, why don't you hit us? Because obviously there has been a few, well, obviously a lot of talk about midfielders, but it was Declan Rice, and obviously a few other names have been thrown in there as well. And there was a question from the viewers as well about that, wasn't there, Pice?
Yeah, there was, and it's something that if you guys haven't actually read Simon's latest article, I think it's your latest actually, you did mention that Chelsea are, giving serious consideration, right, to Tchouameni. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I'm going with Tchouameni. He's from Monaco.
I'll go with you, Pice, because I haven't even tried it yet.
It's a hard one. We'll go with Tchouameni. So, one of the questions that basically the guys wanted to know: do you know what actual price Monaco would really demand? Because we've heard like Chelsea have interest, but do you know if there's a set price? Are they even open to him going? Like, have we had any meetings with his agent? Like, what's going on? Because obviously the number one target, generally, as we all know, is Declan Rice, but they're demanding such a high fee, as you've already mentioned. They value him at £100 million. We don't know, Simon, whether, or maybe you do, but I don't know whether West Ham would be open to something like Tammy plus cash, or is it just strictly cash? So what's going on with the whole midfielder situation, especially Tchouameni, because I think he's a really, really interesting talent that Chelsea could pick up.
Yeah, I mean, Monaco, if you're Monaco, you're going to ask for probably a lot more than what he's worth. The exact sum I don't know, but I mean, in my piece, like he's been valued lately at sort of in the 35 million pound mark, but I think they'd ask for more than that, and that's to get the deal done, and that's quite a lot of money for a player of some promise, but doesn't know the Premier League, unlike Declan Rice. I wouldn't say it's a gamble, but there's a bit more risk involved. But of course, Chelsea has sort of had glowing reports from a certain Cesc Fabregas over how good this kid is. Regarding Declan Rice, the last chat I had was a few days ago that there'd been no new real sort of approach or sounding out from Chelsea. I think if Chelsea were to agree a fee with West Ham, the deal would be done in 5 seconds, because Declan Rice would be like he's on holiday right now, but he'd probably jump in a plane and I think the last thing I saw,
he has his Chelsea kit with him already.
Yeah, I think the last thing I saw, he was on a boat with Mason Mount, wasn't he? He'd probably take command of the boat and drive it back to port pretty sharpish. But again, it's a phenomenal amount of money. I mean, it was a strange one, Declan Rice, because I feel like we're going back in time to a year ago when it was exactly the same. We were in exactly the same position. It's like, oh, Chelsea want Rice, but West Ham asking a stupid amount of money. I'm pretty sure that Rice wants to go, blah, blah, blah. But it was kind of inferred that it was a Frank Lampard-driven signing and that it wasn't not everyone at the club was fully on board with signing Rice. I'm sure you guys have heard or read this before. The sort of feeling of, how can we sign this guy back, having released him at 14? There's a little bit of embarrassment attached, which I think is ridiculous if that is the case, because Chelsea have wasted fortunes on players that have no connection with the club, and they don't seem to mind doing that.
And that didn't seem to be the hold up for Lukaku either when we tried a few years ago. So.
Well, yeah, I thought that was a bit odd. I mean, yes, we are talking a stupid amount of money, and I know not everyone, not every Chelsea fan seems to be on board with bringing Declan Rice to the club. Regarding Tammy Abraham, I don't know this is going to happen, but you could sort of see why it would be an option, because West Ham want Tammy Abraham, and Chelsea are asking for more than West Ham can afford. So why not use it as a means of negotiation? But if you're West Ham, you're going to be like, well, what's the point? They want Declan Rice to hang around, because without him, inevitably you signed Tammy Abraham, but you've lost one of your, if not the best player you've got. But Declan Rice has made it pretty clear that he doesn't see his long-term future at West Ham. He's ignored any attempts by West Ham to get him to sign an extension. So if he doesn't move this window, of course he's got 3 years left, then it's only a matter of time before. Look, we might be in the same pod this time next year, talking about Declan Rice, but it will be with a far greater certainty that something will happen, because West Ham will have to sell him. So if it's not this year, it will be next year, because they run the risk of his transfer value diminishing.
Yeah, and I suppose the hope was almost that West Ham might get relegated, and then he would be available for much cheaper. Instead, they came sixth and are now in Europe.
Well, Chelsea didn't help themselves in that regard last year in terms of the season, the 1920 season, because of course West Ham were looking pretty vulnerable, and then Chelsea sparked West Ham back into form by going to London Stadium and rolling over and giving West Ham 3 points, which they then went on a very good run to stay up, because if West Ham had gone down, I was under the impression that a deal was very much then going to be on the cards. So yeah, that was quite a costly. Of course, Chelsea were the only team to give West Ham 3 points at the back end of that season. But if you remember, West Ham were on a really bad run of form, and that Chelsea win gave them the confidence to finish the season strongly. And then they rode that momentum into last season. And you have to say they did really, really well.
They did. Cheers for that, Alonso, by the way. That third goal still triggers me to this day, honestly. But I think we're going to round it out here. I actually have one super quick last question that I'm not sure if people will care, but I care, just because I find it fascinating. Because, you reported today that Callum Hudson-Odoi, will stay and is part of Tuchel's plans. And obviously a couple of days ago, I'm sure you saw it yourself as well, that Jan Agefjortoft, sorry if I butchered his name, obviously was on Fabrizio Romano's live stream and said that in his, knowledge, Odoi isn't part of Tuchel's plan. And now I'm just wondering, what do you do when you hear that? Do you then question your own source? Do you check, is that true? Do you not care what other people have to say, really, because you have 100% faith in your own sources? Or how does that happen if someone else that's at least tends to be fairly reliable almost says the opposite of what you've just reported?
Oh, you get used to it. Yeah, I mean, Chelsea is... This comes with the territory, in that when you cover one of the biggest clubs in Europe, and certainly one of the most newsworthy clubs in Europe, there are so many. You got to remember, Chelsea are often used to, and I'm not just talking about the Hudson-Odoi thing, but Chelsea are often used to in terms of transfer speculation to spark interest in players and stuff. Chelsea are looking at Sam's. I mean, the amount of times I read a transfer story from abroad, and you're just like, who is this guy? I've never heard of him, and there's no truth in it whatsoever. But of course, Chelsea, there is an element of, oh well, I better go check that out. Look, people have their sources, I'm sure Jan Fjortov has been told something, but all I can go in, and this is where you sort of hope that readers sort of after a while begin to trust what you write. If you get something wrong, they're very quick to tell you, and of course that is never my intention. To sort of to feed false information. I can only go by what I've been told, and sometimes over the years, you will get things wrong, or someone else will beat you to a story, but more often than not, I think your record stands for itself, and I'd like to think that more often than not, I get things right, even if it might not always be first.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to understand as well. Like, you have your sources and you trust your sources, but every source can get it wrong sometimes. And I think the most important thing to understand is that things can just change very quickly. Your source might know that is the current situation, and within 24 hours, the situation might have changed completely. By the time your article is out, that's slowly when things are changing, and then you're sat there, well, what can I do? That doesn't mean like your source is now bad or you are not reliable, but things just happen. Football is a world where things move very, very quickly. But we're going to round it out here. Simon, I really, really do appreciate you coming on and sharing your insight into obviously Chelsea and obviously the world of football as well. Like you just touched on it already, maybe we'll be sat here in a year's time. I'll take you up on that. But yeah, I really do appreciate you coming on, and obviously Pys again, massive thank you for helping sort this out. And if anything you both want to add, please do so in a second. But otherwise, check out both Pys and of course Simon Johnson on Twitter, and of course check out The Athletic. Like Simon just explained, the track record kind of stands for itself. But appreciate you coming on, Simon. Appreciate you coming on as well, Pys. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching. Up the Chelsea, and I'll see you next time.